The barracks smelled of sweat, dust, and iron discipline. Morning sunlight cut through the narrow windows, glinting off the polished boots lined up beside creaking bunks. Dozens of fresh recruits stood at attention, their faces still soft with youth, boys pretending to be soldiers. Among them stood Cadet Tyler Grant, 19 years old, full of energy and arrogance. His uniform was crisp, his confidence unshakable. He had been captain of his high school football team, and somewhere inside, he still believed that strength came from muscle, not from respect. That the echo of boots filled the hall as the door slammed open, in walked Drill Sergeant Harold Briggs, a man well past 50, his hair grayed, his posture stiff but proud. His eyes were cold steel. "All right, maggots," he barked, voice sharp as gravel. "Welcome to reality. I don't care who you were before today, your mama's pride, your school's hero, or your town's sweetheart. In my barracks, you're all the same, unproven." The room fell silent, but Tyler couldn't help it. He smirked. The sergeant's voice cracked slightly when he shouted the last word, and Tyler chuckled under his breath. Unfortunately, Briggs noticed. He walked straight toward him, boots pounding like thunder. "You think something's funny, Cadet?" Tyler tried to hide his grin. "No, Sergeant, it's just what?" Briggs leaned in close, eyes burning. "You think you can laugh at me? You think I'm too old to make you sweat?" The other recruits held their breath. Tyler hesitated, then blurted out, "With respect, Sergeant, I didn't expect my drill instructor to be retired." Looking, the entire room froze. Briggs straightened his back slowly. His silence was far more terrifying than his shouting. Finally, he said, "We'll see how retired I am. Cadet, drop down." Tyler hesitated. "Sir, push until I say stop." Tyler dropped to the floor. His arms trembled as Briggs stood over him. The old man didn't yell, he just whispered, "Every time your arms shake, remember, age doesn't weaken experience." The room stayed quiet, except for the sound of Tyler's breathing and the rhythmic count of the sergeant's boots pacing behind him. After what felt like an eternity, Briggs said, "On your feet." Tyler stood, panting, sweat dripping from his brow. Then Briggs leaned close again and said quietly, "Respect isn't something you demand, son. It's something you earn, often from people you least expect." At that moment, Tyler felt something shift inside him, but his pride wouldn't let it show. He just nodded. Double quotes, "Yes, Sergeant." Briggs gave a slight nod, turned away, and ordered the platoon to march. But as they left the barracks, a shadow appeared at the end of the hallway, a tall figure in full dressed uniform. Every soldier froze. The air went still. Colonel Nathan Ross, commander of the entire training regiment, stood watching silently. His sharp eyes moved from Briggs to Tyler. "Sergeant Briggs," the colonel said in a deep, calm voice, "is there a problem?" Briggs saluted. "No, sir. Just a young cadet learning his first real lesson." The colonel's gaze lingered on Tyler. Then, to everyone's shock, a small, knowing smile crossed his face. "Carry on, Sergeant," he said quietly. Then he turned to leave, his words echoing down the corridor. Sometimes the hardest teachers are the ones we end up thanking the most. Tyler didn't understand what the colonel meant, not yet, but by the end of training, he would. That night, the barracks were silent except for the hum of the ceiling fan and the muffled snores of exhausted recruits. But Cadet Tyler Grant lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His arms still burned from the push-up. His pride still stung from the humiliation, but what kept replaying in his head was not the punishment, it was the colonel's strange words. "Sometimes, the hardest teachers are the ones we end up thanking the most." What did he mean by that? The next morning, while the platoon marched to breakfast, a messenger approached. "Cadet Grant, Colonel Ross wants to see you." Now, every head turned. Tyler's stomach dropped. He followed the soldier down the long hallway toward the colonel's office, a place recruits rarely entered unless they were in serious trouble. Inside, the room smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. Colonel Ross sat behind a large oak desk, his uniform immaculate. His eyes were sharp but calm. "At ease, Cadet," the colonel said. "Sit down." Tyler obeyed, nervously. "I heard you had a moment with Sergeant Briggs yesterday," Ross said, folding his hands. "Yes, sir. I disrespected him. Won't happen again." Ross studied him for a long moment. "Tell me, son, what did you see when you looked at Sergeant Briggs?" Tyler hesitated. "An old man, sir? Someone who's probably seen better days." Ross leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Then you saw only half the truth." He stood up, walked to a wooden cabinet, and opened it. Inside was a framed photo, faded but powerful. It showed a much younger Sergeant Briggs, in desert camouflage, standing in front of a burning convoy. His arm was in a sling, his face streaked with dirt, but his eyes were the same, sharp and alive. Ross handed the photo to Tyler. "Afghanistan, 2009. Briggs led his men through an ambush. He was hit 3 times but refused to be evacuated until every soldier under his command was safe. 4 of them owed their lives to him that day." Tyler's throat tightened. I didn't know." "Sir, of course you didn't," Ross said quietly, "because he doesn't talk about it. Men like him don't need to remind others who they are. Their scars do that for them." The colonel walked back to his desk. "Do you know what's worse than arrogance, Cadet?" Tyler shook his head. Ignorance, you can train a cocky man, but not one who refuses to see the worth in others. The words hit hard. Ross continued. Sergeant Briggs could have retired years ago, but he stayed because he wanted to make sure soldiers like you never learn respect too late. Silence filled the room. Finally, Ross said, I'm giving you a choice. You can stay angry and embarrassed, or you can learn from him, and maybe one day, you'll understand why he still wears that uniform. Tyler swallowed hard. I'd like to learn, sir. Ross nodded once, his expression softening. Then start by listening, not laughing. As Tyler stood to leave, the colonel added quietly, oh, and Cadet, you might want to look up the Silver Star recipient list from 2010. Tyler frowned. Why, sir? Ross gave a faint smile. You'll find a familiar name there. That night, Tyler snuck into the training center's small library. Under the yellow glow of a desk lamp, he flipped through old records until he found it. Silver Star Sergeant Harold Briggs for conspicuous gallantry in action during Operation Iron Dune, Helmand Province, Afghanistan. Tyler stared at the page in silence. The man he had mocked, the one he called looking, had once faced death and walked through it for his brothers. For the first time, Tyler felt something he hadn't before. Shame, but also deep respect. He whispered to himself. I judged him wrong, but this was only the beginning. Because the next morning, when Tyler went to find the sergeant to apologize, he discovered something that would change everything again. Sergeant Briggs wasn't there. His bunk was empty, his nameplate gone, and a sealed envelope lay on Tyler's bed. The morning bugle had already echoed through the camp, but Cadet Tyler Grant didn't move. He sat frozen at the edge of his bunk, staring at the small brown envelope with his name written across it in neat block letters. Grant, T.I. His heart thud, D.E.D. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, heavy strokes that matched the man who'd barked orders and carved discipline into every recruit. It was Sergeant Briggs's. Tyler picked it up with trembling fingers. Inside, there was a single folded note. He hesitated, then opened it. Cadet Grant, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Don't worry, I wasn't discharged or dismissed. I was transferred. It happens sometimes when old war dogs like me get called to train the next batch of recruits somewhere else. But before I left, the colonel told me what happened in his office. I heard you asked about me. That matters more than you think. I saw something in you, son, something I once had before the battlefield took it away. Confidence is good, but without respect, it's just noise. And yesterday, for the first time, I saw that noise quiet down long enough for you to listen. You asked yourself who I was. The truth is, I'm just a man who's made mistakes, buried friends, and carried memories heavier than my rucksack. If I yell at you, it's not to break you, it's to prepare you for the world outside these gates, where no one's going to care about your medals, only your integrity. Tyler paused. His throat tightened. The words on the paper felt alive, like the old man's voice was right beside him again. He kept reading. Asterisk, asterisk, I used to be you once, cocky, fearless, untouchable. Then one day, I laughed at my own drill instructor. He didn't punish me. He just handed me a shovel and said, go dig a hole. I asked, for what? He said, for your pride. I didn't understand it then, but when I came home from war years later, with fewer friends than I left with, I finally did. So, Grant, here's my advice. Dig your pride early, and bury it deep, because someday, when the moment comes that tests you beyond your strength, it won't be pride that saves you. It'll be discipline, humility, and heart. By the time Tyler reached the end, his eyes were burning. The letter continued. Asterisk, asterisk, you've got the potential to be a leader, kid. But remember, leadership isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about standing steady when everyone else runs. I'll be watching your progress from wherever I end up next. Make sure when the colonel asks me about you, and he will, I can tell him, that boy learned how to listen. Sergeant Harold Briggs, asterisk, asterisk. The paper trembled in Tyler's hand. For a long moment, he just sat there, silent. The noise of the barracks faded, the footsteps, the laughter, the drills, everything blurred except the words on that page. He realized something that would stay with him. For the rest of his life, respect wasn't demanded, it was earned. Later that day, Tyler went to the colonel's office again. He saluted sharply. Sir, I received a letter from Sergeant Briggs. Ross nodded slowly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I expected you would. He doesn't write many. You know, that's how I knew he saw something special in you. Tyler took a breath. Sir, I want to be like him, not just a soldier, a man others can look up to. The colonel's eyes softened. Then start now, Cadet. Training isn't about becoming someone else. It's about uncovering who you're meant to be. Tyler nodded firmly. From that day forward, every drill, every order, every challenge, he faced it differently. Not with arrogance, but with purpose. And every night, before he slept, he reread the letter. Sometimes, under his breath, he whispered, dig your pride early, and bury it deep. Weeks passed. The day of the graduation finally came. The recruits stood tall in formation, their uniforms sharp and hearts pounding. Families watched from the stands, proud and tearful. Colonel Ross stood on stage, reading names, shaking hands. When it was Tyler's turn, the colonel handed him his certificate and leaned in just enough to say, "You made him proud." Tyler smiled, eyes wet, and whispered, "Thank you, sir." Then, as he turned to face the audience, he noticed something far in the back. Behind the rows of cheering families stood a familiar silhouette, a man in plain clothes, standing tall, arms crossed, eyes filled with quiet pride. It was Sergeant Briggs. For a split second, their eyes met. Briggs raised a hand, a subtle salute. Tyler's heart swelled. He saluted back, not as a cadet to his superior, but as a man to his mentor. When Tyler looked again, the old sergeant was gone. But in his chest, the lesson remained, and it would echo for the rest of his life. 10 years had passed since Cadet Tyler Grant stood in that graduation line. The boy who once mocked an old drill sergeant was gone. In his place stood Lieutenant Tyler Grant, a battle-hardened soldier. Calm, precise, and fiercely loyal. The sands of Afghanistan stretched before him now, shimmering beneath a brutal sun. He was no longer a trainee. He led a unit of 12 men through one of the most dangerous valleys in the region. But no matter how much time had passed, he still carried something from those barracks, a folded letter, worn and faded, always tucked inside his chest pocket, the one that began with Cadet Grant. That morning, his convoy rolled through a narrow mountain pass, steep cliffs on both sides, perfect for an ambush. The silence felt too heavy. Eyes sharp, everyone, Tyler said through the radio, "Stay alert." Suddenly, boom, an explosion ripped through the first vehicle. The shock wave threw dust and fire into the air. Chaos erupted. Gunfire echoed from the ridges. "Take cover," Tyler shouted, diving behind a rock. His men scrambled for positions. Bullets tore through the air. "Corporal, flank left. Jenkins, cover fire." But the ambush was brutal, well coordinated. Within minutes, they were pinned. Then, through the smoke, Tyler heard a voice on the radio.com, commanding, "Unmistakable. Alpha Team, this is Eagle Command. Hold your position. Reinforcements inbound." Tyler froze. That voice, it couldn't be. "Say again, command." There was static, then the voice came clearer. "You heard me, Lieutenant Grant. Hold your ground. I taught you better than to run." Tyler's breath caught. His heart pounded as if time itself had stopped. "Sergeant Briggs, still breathing." "Son," the voice replied with a dry chuckle, "and still not retired." Tyler blinked back tears, but there was no time to get sentimental. Briggs was out there, coordinating from a forward outpost miles away, guiding air support and extraction. "All right, men," Tyler shouted, renewed strength in his voice. "You heard the man, hold your ground." Minutes turned into an hour. Smoke and sand mixed in the scorching heat. Just when it seemed hopeless, the sky roared helicopters. Missiles streaked down the cliffs, silencing the enemy fire. "Eagle Command, target area neutralized." "Repeat, area neutralized." Tyler exhaled, chest heaving. His men cheered. They had survived. Hours later, after the dust settled, Tyler's team was evacuated to the forward base. He stepped off the chopper, still shaking from adrenaline. There, standing near a command tent, was Sergeant Harold Briggs, older, slower, but still carrying that same steel in his eyes. Tyler froze. For a second, he didn't know what to say. Briggs smirked. "Well, look who decided to stop laughing." Tyler stepped forward, saluted sharply, but this time, Briggs didn't return it. He reached out and pulled Tyler into a hug. "You did good, son," he said softly. "Real good." Tyler's voice broke. "You saved my men." "Sergeant." Again, Briggs shook his head. "No. You saved them. You just needed a little reminder from an old ghost." That evening, the two men sat together by a small campfire outside the tents. For the first time, Tyler saw Briggs not as an instructor or a legend, but as a man. The sergeant's hands trembled slightly as he sipped his coffee. His once strong frame now moved with effort. "You ever think about retiring, Sergeant?" Tyler asked quietly. Briggs smiled faintly. "Retiring means stopping." "I don't stop, kid. I just slow down enough to teach one more lesson." He looked up at the stars. "You remember what I told you about burying your pride?" Tyler nodded. "I do. I've lived by it." Briggs chuckled. "Good, because someday, someone under your command will laugh at you, and when they do, you'll know exactly what to say." The two sat in silence, the fire crackling softly between them, mentor and student. Soldier and soul. A few weeks later, Tyler's unit rotated home. Before leaving, he went to see Briggs one last time. The old sergeant was in the med bay, recovering from a lung infection. Even lying there, he looked unbreakable. Tyler placed something on his bedside table, the old letter, sealed in a frame. "For me?" Briggs asked, voice raspy. "No, Sergeant," Tyler said, smiling. "For the next cadet who forgets what respect means." Briggs looked at him, eyes misty. "You finally got it, didn't you?" Tyler nodded. "You were never trying to make me strong. You were trying to make me worthy." Briggs closed his eyes, a faint smile crossing his lips. "Mission accomplished. Lieutenant, That night, as Tyler boarded the plane home, he looked back one last time at the base fading into the desert. He whispered the same words that once came from that letter: dig your pride early and bury it deep. It had been 15 years since that first day in the barracks. 15 years since a cocky young cadet laughed at an old drill sergeant. Now, Major Tyler Grant stood in the same hallway, only this time, he wore the instructor's uniform. The polished floor reflected his boots. The walls were lined with framed photos of men who had trained generations of soldiers. At the very end of that hallway, beneath a bronze plaque, hung a familiar name: Sergeant Harold Briggs. A soldier's strength lives in the ones he trains. Tyler paused there every morning, straightened his uniform, and whispered under his breath, "Morning, Sergeant." He didn't need a response. The silence itself felt like Briggs's presence still lingered there, watching, measuring, guiding. The recruits of Class 302 stood in line, nervous and restless. Tyler walked past them, silent. Inspecting their uniforms, he saw the same spark he once had, the same pride, fear, and arrogance. And among them was one boy who couldn't stop smirking, young, athletic, too sure of himself. Tyler stopped in front of him. "What's your name, Cadet?" "Cadet Fisher." "Sir, you think something's funny, Cadet Fisher?" The boy hesitated. "No, sir. Just didn't expect the new drill instructor to be this ... young." The recruit snickered. Tyler didn't yell, didn't flinch. He just smiled slightly, a smile full of memory. "Drop down," he said quietly. "Push-ups. Until I say stop." The cadet blinked, confused. "Sir, push-ups," Tyler repeated. "Now." The boy obeyed, his smirk fading. When he started to shake from exhaustion, Tyler leaned close and said softly, "Every time your arms tremble, remember, strength isn't measured by who laughs first, but by who stands last." The recruits fell silent. Tyler's tone, his words, they were familiar, almost identical to the ones Briggs once told him, a lesson passed down, word for word, heart to heart. That night, after dismissal, Tyler sat alone in his office. The room was quiet except for the ticking clock and the hum of the fluorescent light. He opened the drawer and pulled out the same old framed letter from years ago. Briggs's letter, the one that started it all. He read it again, every crease and smudge etched in his memory. Then, a knock on the door. An aide stepped in, saluted, and handed him a small envelope. "Sir, this just came through official channels. It's marked, personal delivery." Tyler frowned. "From who?" The aide hesitated. "From the estate of Sergeant Harold Briggs." Sir, time seemed to stop. Tyler's hand shook as he opened it. Inside was a single folded paper, yellowed with age. But the handwriting was unmistakable. "If you're reading this, it means my journey's finally over. Don't mourn me, I've lived more lives than I ever deserved. You were one of the last cadets I trained. I never told you this, but after that first week, I told Colonel Ross. That boy's got more fire than sense." He laughed and said, "Then he's perfect for you." I guess he was right.